Hey everybody, RPG here. Today we're going to do a full demo and review of the Anbernic RG552 handheld video game console. So to start off the video, we're going to take an external tour of the console. We'll take a look at the layout and controls, and then we'll dive into a bunch of different games on here to test the performance. So let's jump into it. Alright, so here we are with the Anbernic RG552 handheld video game console. So we're going to first start off by taking a tour of all the controls and the layout of this particular handheld. Now I do want to mention I have this powered on. I usually don't like to do that, but the reason I've done it today is the fact that this screen is so large, super shiny, and we are getting some reflection of the lights in the camera behind me here while filming this, which always, when you have a big screen like this that's super bright, you always run the issue of it being a little bit harder to actually film. So I do apologize for the inconvenience there. You probably will see a little bit of me in the background behind me as I continue this touring process of this particular handheld. So starting with the functions here, we have 4-button configuration, A, B, X, and Y. Typical layout here for an Anbernic handheld. The difference here though is the labeling of the button functions. Red, yellow, blue, and green here. Super easy to see. Previously, they've always kept it the same color as the button behind it, so it's a little bit harder to see which button function was which button function on here. This just makes it so much easier, and it looks pretty darn cool as well. Over here on the left-hand side, we have an oversized D-pad, which is nice. You can see with my thumb over it, it still peeks out around the edging, so that gives you an indication as to the size here. And I always like the larger ones because you could be a little bit more precise in games. The smaller ones, it's a little bit harder to hit the diagonal functions on here. Always pretty simple to hit up, down, left, and right, but when you want to try to go diagonally, it can be a little bit of a challenge. Now up here we have our start and select buttons, which I love the placement of. If we think to like a Powkiddy RGB10 Max, their start and select buttons are down here. And luckily on that particular handheld, you have the ability to remap them to, there's some additional buttons up at the top. That's always something that I did because when you're playing like this, it's so much easier to hit, start and select up this way versus going all the way down here. This is a bit of a jump. Going up here is just so much easier. So I love the fact that they've saved us the trouble of having to like remap or make adjustments and just took that location right off the bat. So if we're playing like a MAME arcade game and we just died with our turn and we have to go up here and hit select, it's just so much easier to hit select, add our coins, hit start, and jump right back into the game than to have to jump over these analog sticks and do it that way. So down here we have our dual analog sticks, which are great, very much in line with what Anbernic does in most cases with their products like the RG351V, RG351MP. Looks to be the exact same analog sticks, which I always loved the way that they looked. So performance on those is always great. We'll be paying close attention when we jump into some games here though to follow this portion of the video, just to make sure that the performance is top notch there. They also have the button function. You hear me clicking it there on the right, clicking it there on the left. You don't use that a whole lot in most of your retro video games, but for the ones that you do use it on, it's certainly great to have a high level of performance there. So jumping down to the bottom, you can see we have some speakers on the left and right. We also have dual micro SD card slots, so you'll be using 2 micro SD cards to, get your games up and running or your operating system and all that. Here we have a reset button and a function button. Now we'll go over to the left-hand side. We have our volume control. Love external volume controls. These are pretty standard nowadays on handheld consoles, but wasn't always the case. So what you used to have to do is you used to have to go in and you'd hit start, open up your main menu, drop down to your sound settings, and adjust your volume this way. So you can see I'm adjusting it up and down, but with these, we can just go over here, hit up, bring our volume up, and then bring it right back down, which is great because with emulation, each collection is going to have different volume controls and different volume levels because, let's face it, each collection can be, years apart or even decades apart, so they're not going to have the same volume levels throughout. So back out of all that. On the right-hand side here, we just have our power button. So this is the button you'll be hitting to power this on. You do not want to power it down by holding this though. You want to always go into your main menu, regardless of what operating system you're running here. Let me just let that kind of load in there. There we go. And then you would just go down to quit at the bottom. And again, this is going to be pretty much the same regardless of which OS you're running. you'll hit quit and then just hit shut down. So that's always the way you want to shut down. You don't want to just hit that button or rip your SD cards out or anything like that. That just gives you potential problems with corrupting cards and stuff like that. So stay away from doing stuff like that if possible. Up here on the top, we obviously have our L1, L2, R1, and R2 buttons. So shoulder buttons on the outside, trigger buttons on the inside. Very sleek design here. You see they don't hang over much at all. Hardly even notice them up here, which is always good. The larger they are, sometimes people like them, oversized. I personally don't. I like them close to the frame because if you were to drop this or hit it on anything, you're going to run into issues where, the bigger they are, the more damage you could potentially do to them. So the fact that they're nice and sleek and tight to the frame here just, is going to give you a longer lasting experience on here without running into issues where you're doing damage or anything like that. So love the sleek design up there. We have right here a mini HDMI port. So you can actually connect a mini HDMI to regular HDMI cable here and be able to connect this handheld to your TV or monitor, which is a really cool function and feature that you typically don't have on a handheld console like this. Over here we have a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack. Here we have a USB Type-C connection, and then right here, which you see my cable hanging out of, is the power supply cable. So this is how you could power this if your battery's dead, like mine currently is. It was actually delivered to me dead, so I'm kind of charging it and demoing this process today all in one. So you can see that's clearly the power supply one because I'm charging this as we speak. Now over here we have some ventilation for cooling, which is great. If you've seen any of my videos in the past on handhelds, Raspberry Pis, anything, PCs for PC gaming, ventilation or cooling is a huge part of emulation. It's often super overlooked, and people are usually paying attention to the power and different capabilities of the computer that they're running and all that, and always overlook the fact that you need to have substantial cooling for a lot of these game collections that we try to jump into, whether you're doing it on a handheld or a regular computer for emulation. So that's pretty much it. We'll jump over to the back side here. So we have these grips right here, which just, give you little strips to kind of grip onto with your fingertips. Always, typically see these on Anbernic's products, or sometimes they have like a ridged surface, which we actually have right here. So if by some chance your fingers don't 100% line up with these, and you were to put them on here, this just gives you like a little extra grip too. So really nice to see. And I'll show you this way. They actually act as kind of like stoppers too. So if you were to just like drop this down on a tabletop like this, it's not going to slide at all. This is a slick wood surface desk right here. This is not sliding at all. Grips really nicely. So if you kind of just throw this down or it drops, you don't have to worry about it sliding across and falling off the other side of a table or anything like that. So it's just like little details like that that go a long way with products like this. So that's pretty much the entire layout here. We're going to jump into some games and test out the performance of the Anbernic RG552. All right, so we first took a tour of the layout of this particular handheld. Love everything about this in terms of where everything's laid out on here. I think they've really done a nice job of going in and fine-tuning everything that they've done previously and really giving you the best of everything that they've done here. So love the controls. All the different functions and features on here are all firing on all cylinders. Love the analog sticks, as I always do with Anbernic's products. Love the button functions. There's no sticks, lags, delays, nothing like that at all. It's all high quality here. I even like the shoulder and trigger buttons up top. You know, they're not going to be like the hinged ones that the Powkiddy RGB10 Max has. The Max 2 anyways has. You know, they have those hinged trigger buttons. You don't have that here. Everything's pretty tight to the frame, as I showed in that initial tour, but I do like that. I think that that's going to last a lot longer over time. You know, if you're dropping this, which, you know, we're all going to drop this at some point if we're not always super careful, this is going to hold up a little better than something that's raised and hanging off of the frame. So I really like that. Now, in terms of the performance here, once we get started, I don't love the stock cards that come on here. That's typical for any handheld, regardless of brand. The stock cards are usually just not great. And one of the things that I noticed first and foremost on here when jumping into games is when I try to get out of games, there's no hotkey function. So you usually would hit start and select at the same time. That's going to jump you out of a game, bring you back to your game collection, and then you can, you know, select another game or jump into another collection entirely. That's not the case here. You have to hit the reset button at the bottom, which is not a great way to go. That's always going to potentially cause corruptions. Nobody wants to have corruptions on their card. If it corrupts, you're going to have a useless card. So I don't like the fact that they have not given you hotkey functions on here. Maybe there's another way to exit games that I'm not aware of, but I've tried a bunch of different things on here, had no luck whatsoever. So I had to hit that reset button after each and every game. Again, not going to be you know, a great move to keep doing repeatedly whenever trying to jump out of games and get into a new one. So definitely keep that in mind. But in terms of the performance here, it performs pretty well for the most part. I find it to be very much in line with all the other handhelds out there from Anbernic in the past. There's not a great selection on this particular you know, pair of cards that come stock on here. So for a collection like N64, there's a lot of titles on here actually for N64, and they run pretty well. Now, I went through just 2 titles here for you guys, and one to pay close attention to would be Cruisin' World. It looks pretty laggy, or not laggy, glitchy in spots. You can see that it stutters here and there, and it stutters pretty often. Now, it's not a stutter that's going to make the game unplayable. You can see that I went through the entire, you know, first race there. No real issues, but it's not the smoothest performance in the world. That being said, if we tried to jump into this particular game on any other Anbernic product out there, we are going to get to a point in that game where it slows down to a point where you can't play that game at all. So this is a major step up in regards to N64. It's just not going to be a step up that's going to give you flawless performance. But I really don't think that any other handhelds out there are going to give you flawless performance in N64. In most cases, you're going to run into issues in N64, even on like a Raspberry Pi. It's unfortunately just one of those collections that is really tough to emulate unless you're using like a full-size PC, or even a gaming PC is going to, you know, get you that performance level that, you know, we all really desire on there. That would be true to the original console. For handhelds though, this seems to be the best option out there in my opinion. Now, Dreamcast we jumped into. Dreamcast on these cards only has, I think, 4 or 5 games, and they're not games that are really particularly difficult to emulate. So I don't feel like we really get a clear indication of where the performance lies in terms of Dreamcast games. We did jump in here and we played one Dreamcast game. It ran really nicely, but again, it's not going to be something that we can really gauge the collection's performance on this particular handheld off of. So when I put together my own card where I'll put a bunch of different games on here for each of these collections, I'll be able to really test it out a little bit further and give us a better indication of where the performance truly lies on here, because obviously they're going to set you up with games that work really nicely. Even for N64, they're not going to set you up with games that are going to totally crap out on you, because that's just not going to be a good look for their product. So when I put together my card, I'll also put together some even more challenging N64 games so we can also test that out a little bit further. But in terms of everything that I tested out on here, everything does run pretty well. It's not going to be flawless, like I said, for N64. Dreamcast seemed to be pretty flawless here. Not sure if that's going to be the case for every single title out there. Same could be said with like PSP. That's just one of those collections as well that is really tough to emulate, especially on handhelds. But everything prior to these 3 collections is going to run phenomenally on this particular handheld. So your Sega Genesis, your NES, Super Nintendo, arcade, all that good stuff is going to work flawlessly on the Anbernic RG552 handheld video game console. It's just going to be the issue of N64, Dreamcast, and PSP being, hit or miss in some cases. And again, with this selection that they've given us, we really can't test everything out to the level that I'd like to. So once I get my own card together and I put together a custom list of games, I'm going to dive back in here with a part 2 to really test this out the way I'd want to test it out to give you guys the best information possible on this particular handheld. So that's going to do it for today. So if you enjoyed this video and you did find it helpful, smash the like button for me. Be sure to subscribe to the RetroPie Guy YouTube channel just to stay in the loop for all future videos. I do a ton of stuff on here based on retro gaming, tutorials, gameplay demos, product reviews, Forgotten Favorites YouTube series every single week on here. So tons of content to see, and you definitely want to stay in the loop for the part 2 video that I do once I dive in here and create a custom card for this particular product so we can fully test it the way I'd want to test it out and get a better idea as to where the performance kind of lies on here and where it drops off. So definitely stay in the loop, hit the subscribe button. You can do that in the bottom right corner of this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. See you guys real soon.